In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your standard gauge visuals with equivalent conditionally formatted progress bar versions, so you can create KPI related visuals in a more modern, cleaner, and accessible way. Let's jump in. Now, when I first started working with Power BI, gauge charts are my go-to visual when I needed to show overall results versus a specific goal. They're simple, easy to read, and we're all familiar with how gauges work in the real world, so they do make sense. However, one issue we've always had with gauges is how they auto-resize depending on the values within them. These two gauge charts that we see right here are actually the same exact size. However, they don't appear to be. And that's because the gauges will auto-size depending on the target value within them. And when that happens, it can make our gauge charts look sloppy when looking at multiple gauge charts on the same page. So in this example here, if we look at the right-hand side gauge chart, we can see that it looks like our title isn't centered. And that's because the target value is on the right-hand side. So it's pushed that gauge chart to the left. Now, if we compare that to the visual on the left-hand side, we can see that that title looks center. And notice how the gauge charts themselves are different proportions. So this is a development flaw, and hopefully one day Microsoft will invest in enhancing the gauge chart, maybe even add some variations similar to what I'm about to show you. Now, a progress bar, like we see right here, works great for communicating how close we are to a goal. Now, creating a visual like this that includes the conditional formatting requires a few different steps, as a progress bar isn't a standalone visual that exists yet in Power BI. So we need to get a little creative here, especially if we want to incorporate this conditional formatting. So let's jump into Power BI and build this visual from scratch. Now, for this demo, I just created a simple background in Microsoft PowerPoint using shapes and semi-transparent gradients. Then I just saved it as a PNG file, loaded it into the canvas background of Power BI, and set the image size to fit. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is insert a stacked bar chart. And then the measure I'm going to use for this bar chart is going to be net profit. The net profit measure here is simply the gross sales minus the cost of goods. So this will be the measure that we want to compare to a defined target. I'm going to click on it, insert it into the x-axis. Then we're going to go to add further analysis to this visual, constant line, click add line. We're going to rename it goal, and then under the line value, we're going to click FX. Then we're going to search for the measure called net profit goal and click OK. Now let's click on color, and we'll go with black 20% lighter. We're going to lower the transparency to 0%. Change the line style to dotted. We'll turn on scale by width. We'll leave the width at 3 pixels. And we'll make sure the position is in front. Turn on data label. Expand it. We'll leave the horizontal as left, but we'll change the vertical to under. For color, we'll go with our black 20% darker. For display units, we're going to go with none. Value decimal places will be 0. And for style, we're going to change it to both. So if we look at this net profit goal measure, we can see it's simply summing up the net profit goal field from the KPI table. And if we look at our data model, we can see that we have an extension of the date table that brings in the fiscal year related mapping, such as our net profit goal at the month year level. All right, now let's select that bar chart. Go to Format Your Visual, General, Properties. We're going to open up padding and change the left side padding to 20 pixels, the right side to 20 pixels, we'll make the bottom 15 pixels, and we'll make the top 5 pixels. We'll scroll down and turn title off, turn header icons off. Next, we'll open up effects and turn background off. All right, so now let's take that bar chart and manually resize it for now. We want to place it inside of our background box. We'll start by left aligning it to the left side of the box, and then manually adjusting the right side width, and then manually adjusting the bottom height. Once you have that perfectly centered and the height touching the bottom, you're going to adjust the top height to a little over 50% of the height of the empty portion of the box. So let's scroll up and see what we got here. I'm actually going to make the size 120 for the height, and we'll adjust the width 385. And I'm just going to manually adjust positioning to the very bottom. Now from here, I'm going to make sure my properties is open, and I actually want to push this to the right by 10 pixels. I'm going to go to my horizontal positioning and change this to 457. Then I'm going to go to my width and lower this by 25. So we're going to change this to 350. So what we're doing here is making room for our flag icon that we're going to put at the end of this, while also having similar white space on the left-hand side. Next, we're going to switch to visual settings. We're going to open up the Y-axis. We're going to turn values off, title off, and then we'll open up the X-axis. We're going to change the minimum range to 0. We'll leave the maximum as auto, turn values off. Now let's scroll down, open up bars, and then layout. We're going to lower the space between categories to 0%. Now let's scroll up, and under bars, we're going to apply some conditional formatting to this bar. So we're going to click FX, we're going to change it to rules, and we're going to change the measure to net profit percent to goal. We're going to add 3 new rules, and we're going to say if greater than or equal to min, less than 0.4, give us this light shade of red. If greater than or equal to 0.4 and less than 1, give us this shade of yellow. And then if greater than or equal to 1 and less than or equal to max, give us this shade of green. And the hex code for the red is FBD0D3. The yellow is F6E9BC. And the green we're using is CAF3E7. All right, next we're going to click OK. Now let's go to our measures and look at that net profit percent to goal measure. We can see it's a very simple measure where we're dividing the net profit by the net profit goal. Now when we look at our bar chart right now, we can see that the conditional formatting hasn't applied to it. So what's going on? Well, it's because we need to bring a field from the calendar table into the Y-axis, since these goals are at a date-related level. And one quick workaround for this would be to simply create a calculated column within your calendar table and type equals 1, just like this. Once you do that, you can drag that into the Y-axis, and now the conditional formatting will apply. Let's test this out real quick. I'm going to drag in the fiscal quarter field to filters on this page. I'm also going to drag in the fiscal year. Let's filter to a fiscal year and see this conditional formatting in action. So we can see the yellows working here. You can see the reds working. But notice how the difference between the net profit and the remainder of the goal is blank. Now this would look a lot nicer if that blank was a light gray, because then it would look like we're trying to fill up that progress bar. However, the problem is when we insert another measure into our bar chart, we lose the ability to do conditional formatting. So if I were to drag this net profit measure here, which is going to give me the difference, we can see that the conditional formatting is lost for the net profit. We can go to bars, and I could switch that difference measure to gray, so that looks good. However, when I go back to net profit, I'm stuck with a solid color. So the workaround is to duplicate the original bar chart. So I'm just going to press Control-C, Control-V, drag it right down here for now. We're going to go to Add Data to your visual. I'm going to drag in this measure right here called net profit for bar chart. So this measure will return the net profit goal if the net profit is less than 0, which means the entire bar in our case will be gray. And if greater than or equal to 0, then it'll subtract the net profit from the net profit goal. And that difference will be the light color of gray. So let's go to Format Your Visual. We'll turn the legend off, open up bars. We're going to change the color of the net profit to white. Then we're going to change the color of our difference measure to a light gray. Then we're going to hold Control, select the first visual we made right above it, go to Format, Align Top, Align Left, go to View, Selection Pane, and just make sure that your original chart is on the top layer. Now your chart should look like this. All right, let's close that up. And as we can see here, when we play around with our filters, it's working as expected. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do here is insert a blank button. Go to Buttons, Blank, drag it right over here. We're going to scroll down and open up Style. I'm going to turn Border off, open up Icon, change the icon type to Custom. And what I'm going to do here is browse for a SVG flag icon. And if you're not sure where to find free SVG icons, feel free to check out my SVG icon video shown here. All right, so you can see I inserted this flag triangle icon, and I made the icon size 35, padding 4 pixels all around. And for the size of the button, you can make that 35 by 45. And then lastly, we need to make sure we position it right at the end of our progress bar chart. All right, so the next thing we need to do is insert a card to bring our net profit total into. Now we could opt for data labels within our bar chart. However, this is going to look a lot nicer if we insert the total net profit into a card. So let's go to Visualizations, and we're going to click on Card New. We're going to open up Measures and put in Net Profit. We're going to go to Format Your Visual, General, Properties, Padding. We're going to make the left side 20, the top will be 5, the right will be 5, and the bottom will be 5. Next, we'll scroll down, open up Effects. We're going to turn the background off. Keep scrolling down and turn header icons off. Now we'll scroll up and click on our visual settings. We're going to open up callout values. We're going to make sure the series says net profit. I'm going to go with a Sego UI Bold, 22 font size. The color, I'm going to go with black 20% lighter. Let's scroll down. For display units, we'll go with none. Value decimal places, we'll go with a 0. Let's expand label. For the font, I'm going to go with Sego UI. I'm going to go with a size of 14. For the color, I'm going to go with black 40% lighter. Position will stay above. We'll change the space between label and value to 3. Let's keep scrolling down and open up cards. For the series, we're going to change it to net profit. For the size, we're going to go with custom. The left side is going to be 10 pixels, and the rest will be 0 pixels. We're going to keep scrolling down and turn background off, as well as border. Now let's take this card, manually resize it, and we're going to place it in the top left corner of our progress bar background. And as you're resizing this, it's important to make sure that that value does not overlap the vertical target line of your bar chart. I'm going to go to General, Properties, and look at the size. So the height I have looks pretty good. I'll probably bump that down to 85. Now the width I'm going to make a little bigger, just in case that value were ever to expand. So we'll change it to 240. All right, next thing we're going to do is go to Shapes, and we're going to insert an oval. We're going to manually adjust the height and the width, drag it right over here for now. I'm going to go to General, Properties, and I'm going to make the height just a little smaller. We'll go with 35 pixels. For the width, we'll bump that up to 100. Now, next thing we need to do is align this oval to the end of our bar chart. And we can actually see that red vertical line letting us know that we are aligned with that bar chart. So the next thing I want to do is align this with the top of the word net profit. So I'm going to quickly insert a line, and I'm going to drag it right above net profit. And then I'm going to click on my shape, use my up arrows till I touch that line, and then we'll delete that line. Now we're going to conditionally format the color of this shape the exact same way we did with the progress bar. So I'm going to select the shape and go to Style. Click FX, change it to Rules, find our net profit percent to goal measure, and we'll enter in that exact same conditional formatting that we did earlier. All right, so you can see I applied that same conditional formatting. And if you need the hex codes again, here's our red, FBD0D3. Our yellow is F6E9BC. And our green is CAF3E7. Then click OK. Now let's open up the border, and we're going to apply the exact same conditional formatting here as well. The only difference is that we're going to go with a darker shade of that same color. I'm going to click FX, Rules, Net Profit Percent to Goal, and let's do that again. All right, so you can see we have the same exact conditional formatting, except the colors are a little darker. So the hex code for our red is going to be BC101C. Hex code for our yellow is going to be B49218. And for green, we have 26A680. All right, next thing we're going to do is insert a regular card. And we're going to put in the net profit percent to goal measure. Let's go to Format Your Visual, General, Effects. We're going to turn background off, turn header icons off. Let's go up to Properties, Padding, and we're going to zero out the padding on all four sides. Now let's go to the visual settings, turn category label off, open up callout values. I'm going to go with the Sego UI semi-bold, make the size 12. We're going to go with a black 20% darker. Then we'll take that card, move it up here, and start manually resizing it. We want to place it right inside of our background box. And one thing you can do if you want is zoom into 200%, and you can make the size of the card the size of the oval background box. Then from here, you can manually adjust the positioning if you'd like. So for me, I'm going to move it down just slightly so it's center between the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to move it over to the right because I'm going to be inserting another card here to the left-hand side. That's going to show a symbol that's going to represent the conditional formatting. Now what we're going to do is click on the FX, and we're going to apply the exact same conditional formatting that we did before, except we're going to use even a darker shade of the color that we used before. All right, so I've applied the exact same conditional formatting, same rules, and the shades that I'm using are 750A11 for the red, yellow will be 705B0F, and for the green, we have 186850. Next thing we're going to do is copy that card that we just made. So Control-C, Control-V, drag it right over here for now. We're going to go to Add Data to Your Visual, and we're going to replace this measure with a different measure called Net Profit Percentage to Goal text symbol. We're going to make that a little smaller here, and we're going to place that right inside that background box, right about there. All right, so let's take a look at this measure here. We can see it's a simple switch true function. And we're saying if the net profit percent to goal is blank, give us this dash. If the net profit percent to goal is less than 1 and greater than 0.4, give us this warning symbol, which aligns with our yellow conditional formatting. If our net profit percent to goal is less than 0.4, give us this siren, which will align with our red conditional formatting. And then if none of those are true, that means we've successfully met goal, therefore we'll show a check mark. Now, adding symbols like this is a UX design choice related to accessibility. Adding symbols is a great way to ensure your audience understands if a value is good or bad, as they don't need to rely on a color alone. With almost 10% of the population having a type of colorblind deficiency, it just makes sense to do this when we can. Now, a Power BI UX UI designer does not choose colors randomly. If we were to look at these 3 colors here under the true column, if you happen to not have any colorblind deficiency, you would see these colors as true. However, if you look to the right, you can see that these colors do not look the same for different people with certain types of colorblind deficiencies. Look how close the red and the green look for protanopia and deuteranopia. Almost identical. Now let's look at these shades. Look how we can now distinguish those colors within all 4 columns. So just with us adjusting the hue of this green and the red, you can see that we were able to make these colors more accessible to a broader audience. Now, I cover this topic more in depth in my course, 14 Days to Mastering Power BI UX UI Design. But just as a quick tip, you can check out davidmathlogic.com/colorblind if you want to experiment with your color schemes. All right, so the last thing we're going to do here is insert our slicers for the top portion of our visual. We're going to go to Visualizations, and I'm going to select Button Slicer. We're going to go to Data. We're going to open up the Date table, and I'm going to insert Fiscal Quarter. I'm going to go to Format Your Visual, General, Properties, Padding. I'm going to leave the left and the right side 5 pixels, but I'm going to change the top and the bottom to 6 pixels. Then I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to turn Title off, Header icons off, open up Effects, turn Background off. Then I'm going to scroll up and click Visual Settings. We'll expand Shape and change the shape to Rounded Rectangle. I'm going to lower the radius to 10. Then I'm going to open up Layout. I'm going to change my max rows to 1, my columns to 4. Then we'll scroll down and open up Callout Values. I'm going to switch it to Default. The font, we're going to go with Sago UI. I'm going to go with the size of 10. For the color, I'm going to go with this white 10% darker. Now I'm going to change it to Hover. For the hover state, I'm going to change the color to white, and I'm going to make the font Sago UI bold. Then for selected, we'll do the same thing. Sago UI bold, color of white. I'm going to switch this back to default, scroll down, I'm going to open up buttons. I'm going to switch this to default, I'm going to turn border off, open up fill, and I'm going to change the transparency to 100% while leaving the color as white. Let's open up size, select custom, we'll leave it 4 pixels all around. Now let's go ahead and change the state to hover. We're going to change the color to white, and change the transparency to 90%. Let's take this now and move it up to the top. Resize it. We're going to place it on the right-hand side, and you want to resize it the same exact size as that right-hand side. Now what we're going to do is take this a step further. So while I have this slicer selected, I'm going to go back into my visual settings, under buttons, change it to selected. For the fill, we're going to apply some conditional formatting. We're going to use the same rules we've been using this whole time, but the color we're going to choose is going to be the color that we chose for the border of our oval. Let's click FX. All right, so we've applied our conditional formatting. And if you want the hex codes for these colors, we have the red as BC101C. We have the yellow as B49218. And we have the green as 26A680. All right, next thing we need to do is lower the transparency to 0%. And now you can test this out. As you can see, these selections are changing based off of the state of the visual. So now that you have that, the next step would be to copy and paste the slicer. Drag the second one over here, we'll unselect that, and we're going to switch out quarter with the fiscal year. So I'm going to make sure I'm on this left side slicer and replace fiscal quarter with fiscal year. Then I need to go back and format your visual, layout, and in this particular data model, we're only looking at 3 fiscal years, so I'm going to change the columns to 3. And we're also going to need to adjust the padding, because you can see here when we hover, it cuts off some of the label. So if we scroll down under buttons, you can change the padding here to 1 all the way around, but we're also going to want to do it for the hover. We'll select hover, do 1, and to keep that same consistency, we'll do a 1 for the default. That looks good. And I'm also going to adjust the quarter ones to be 1 as well. Again, just so we keep that same consistency for both of our slicers. One thing I do notice though, is that the labels are left aligned for the quarters. So I'm going to quickly go to callout values and just make sure I am center aligned. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my fiscal year ones. Also want to make sure these slicers are top aligned. So I'm selecting both, top aligning them. And just one last tip, I would strongly suggest you group all of your layers, name them, and put them in the right order. It makes it very easy to copy and paste this into the same exact page or a new page. Then you can just simply adjust your measures within these visuals with the different measures that you'd like to track. All right, so I really hope you found value in this tutorial on how to create UX/UI designed progress bars in Power BI. If you did find this tutorial helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, click the notification button. That way you'll be notified when I come out with additional videos related to Power BI UX/UI design. If you have any requests, feel free to leave them in the comments. And then lastly, if you're looking for a course on Power BI UX/UI design, feel free to check out the description where I have a link to my premium course, 14 Days to Mastering Power BI UX/UI Design.